I want to sort of start talking about App's video statement and the things that he said. So Remco, I suppose you'd agree with this. Is the first thing he said is that it wasn't fun anymore. He wasn't having fun. He was turning up each week. The driving standards weren't great, and that for him took the fun out of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at the sim races race, I participated in two of them. The first one was with sim racers who know what they are doing, who know how the game works. And in the second one, I was more backward in the grid, and I was suddenly confronted with real racing drivers. It's just that difference is so massive that after like the first time I got hit by that Formula E driver, I was instantly like, why do I care? Because of the format that's being used, you're instantly out of the game when someone crashes you. And with Formula E, the driver's grid, you can definitely see that in the first turn, it's usually a mess. Even at Berlin, I watched it back. In the first lap, it wasn't as big of a problem because the track was way wider, but you saw someone just plowing into the rear of the field, almost not braking. And I understand that people won't take serious if someone else does that to you.
And I suppose Remco, like lots of the drivers have come out, like even Vern came out and he said that obviously like driving these cars, they're not realistic, and therefore that means that the drivers don't care. Therefore, they're using people as brakes to actually slow down, which people were saying like Nick De Vries, Jerome D'Ambrosio, they say just use them as brakes to slow down so they can try and get past, and then that creates this sort of bubble of it not being fun and it not being serious, and therefore when you're doing something for 8 weeks and you've lost interest by week 3, things start to slip.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, yeah, there's not much more to say to that. That car isn't the same as real life, but that's in any simulator, try to simulate as close as possible, but it's never going to be the same. So I know someone from another simulator, they have the IndyCar guys on there. They literally said, even though they are trying to simulate it, once we jump in, it's a different car, and that's how you should treat it. And if you treat that seriously, it's going to be a fun race and everyone is going to have fun. But if you are not going to take it seriously, it only takes one drive to not take it seriously, and it just gets a chain reaction to the other drivers, and suddenly it's not fun for anyone anymore.
Yeah, I suppose like at the end of the day, Ed, it is a game. Like it is a game, and whatever car you've got in front of you, you just have to adapt and drive it as fast as possible. Yes, it's not going to be as realistic as Formula E car. I don't think any sim, will ever probably get a car exactly right where a driver goes, you know what, unless, of course, unless they're virtual sims that they use in the factory. But, those are, you've got the data left, right, and centre to plough into those. But in terms of actual, like a game like R Factor 2 iRacing, I don't think any car will be exactly the same. So you just adapt and you drive to what you can do and try and have the best time as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's a bit of accessibility in this, and that even in R Factor, where there's a lot of realistic elements in there, there's many as they could put in. It's never going to be exactly the same as the real car, and I think that's in terms of getting people sim races or even just normal people to actually be able to drive it. I think that's actually positive in terms of it's not sort of saying, well, oh, you have to be an amazing real life racing driver. No, there's more of a sort of openness, and that means we get sim races and Formula E drivers to compete. I think what it really highlights for me is that the Formula E drivers event should not have been the main event. The main event should have been the sim race champ, because the racing in that, and I'm sort of giving credit to Remco here, has been consistently of a higher standard in terms of we saw our Hong Kong where Joshua Rogers and Lucas Miller were running side by side for like several corners. That really stood out to me as showing just how much higher the standards are in terms of drivers going side by side without barging into one another. And I don't think you ever saw anything that good in the Formula E drivers race. And sim racers race, that's of course where the prize is as well. It would have made way more sense to make that the championship and have the Formula E drivers race. No points, no championship. It's just you do the races for fun, and no one cares if people crash each other out or indeed use ringers to drive for them.
But Remco, what I really want to discuss is that he was texting the drivers. He was dropping hints effectively that he wasn't driving. And we mentioned the serious drivers, Formula E drivers, that is, with the likes of Stoffel Van Dorn, who can do well, Oliver Rowland potentially, Pascal Volo, Maximilian Gumpfer, who, you know, have taken to the series, who have done quite well. And it was Van Dorn who was really the first one that sort of said, this isn't app driving. And maybe those techs sort of, you know, alerted Van Dorn to when he did that quick qualifying time that, okay, this is an apt. And then, you know, because he's putting a lot of time and effort into it and is actually quite quick, you know, because he's taken it seriously, he took more of offence to that and then ousted, you know, apt when it came to the podium press conference interviews at the end.
Yeah, what I think, coming back to what Edward said, Formula E made this seem like a serious event, but for sim racers, that's very easy to do. Sim racers have taken this seriously for a very long time. Real racers have never done that. Of course, what Abt said in his own video, some take very seriously, a lot of them don't. So I think what actually went wrong here was Formula E themselves, like putting it out to the public as a very serious event for the sim races. That's the main event. But in the end, the drivers themselves were not in on that. They didn't think the same. And that's why Abt, of course, thought I'm doing a practical joke, which would totally have been okay if this was just like, yeah, the serious sim racers have gone, now let's have the fun Formula E drivers event. And what I think, the Van Dorn, the Rowland, that really took it seriously, they would probably have had more fun if they joined the challenge grid with the sim racers. So I don't think it's all on Abt either, but still, in the end, he cheated in a charity event, and that on itself is bad.